of Timbuktu. All he could see was the Sankore section, which is where the mosque, the Sankore Mosque, the University Mosque of Timbuktu was. He could see that very clearly, but he couldn't see the merchant sections and the wealthy sections of Timbuktu. However, the picture that he painted, the drawing that he did with his hands of Timbuktu still stands as an important testimony to the level of African urbanization. And that's this next shot. That's his picture of Timbuktu. And he could only see that little slice in the white. This is the Sankore University Mosque. The history of Timbuktu is a very complex history. It's a very, very complex history, and it's very well documented. Rather than to go into it in excruciating detail, because there's a lot of that, and I don't want to go through that right now. You get lost, I get lost in it. It's really kind of, you know, there's a lot of stuff there. And the names are similar. You would have, for example, Muhammad bin Muhammad Abdul Muhammad, or his cousin with a different name. See what I'm saying? With one different letter or something. But basically, in a nutshell, do you mind if I just ramble like this? I've really never had an opportunity to do this. Everybody says, stay on this subject or you won't understand. Okay, what you have in Timbuktu is you have a large merchant class of Muslims who have enough money that they can start sending their children to school full time. Okay, that still happens in different parts. It was founded roughly in 1100 by Maxkara Tuareg clans, and in its founding, it quickly became a small oasis where the camels caravans with the salt and the river caravans could meet. So it grew because of trade. It attracted settlers from Jenny, its parent city, and continued to grow. Now, while it grew, it attracted several different types of scholarly families from different parts of West Africa. The Al-Aqit family, A-Q-I-T, family was, they were Musafa Tuaregs, Masufa Tuaregs, from the road from the salt mines to the north to Timbuktu. They were Tuaregs, or the guys with the veils, right? That was one of the groups. That was one of the big families. You had big families from, big important scholarly families from the interior of West Africa. You had the Saganugus and some other families, and all these families began to become very highly learned in Islamic studies. And the University of Timbuktu was a mosque. It was a mosque. Sankore is a mosque. It is not any other kind of educational building. It's used for prayer on Friday, and during the day, scholars in the different fields would, take the tutelage of individual students, and the students would study with them for 10, 12 years, and learn different books and the rest of that. And subjects like philology and astronomy and the rest were taught through there, but the type of abstract curriculum that is projected in some sources is not the type of curriculum that existed in Muslim universities in general, and in University of Moscow, Sankore in particular. However, the level of scholarship became, by the 13th century, the level of scholarship was very high, and by the time that the Empire of Mali, gained access to the political ties in the Middle East and Egypt. Remember, Mansa Musa of Mali made this big pilgrimage to Mecca, and he gave up so much gold that it changed the value of gold in Egypt. And that's saying something. When you talk about Egypt and the value of gold, that's a whole lot of gold. So anyway, it brought more influences there, and you know, it continued to be a cosmopolitan center, and different groups from different parts of Africa, but particularly West Africa, studied there, and in Kabara, and in Gundam, and in Mopti, and in Jenny, you see what I'm saying, and in Alhamdulillah, Niger Ben cities were all centers of education. The whole thing about the libraries in Timbuktu is that the libraries were personal libraries of the scholars. The issue that comes up regarding Ahmed Baba and the Moroccan invasion is an issue that, again, the polemics or the line of reasoning says, okay, what they do is they come in and they burn your libraries. Okay? That's what's said. One has to take a chronological look at the events of the Moroccan conquest or the Moroccan invasion of Songhai that took place in 1591, beginning with the Battle of Tondibi. What happened was, after the Battle of Tondibi, where 2,000 mostly Andalusian musketeers under the Moroccan army defeated close to 12,000 cavalry of the Songhai. I've seen stuff written that says, and the Songhai only had their spears in the book. Songhai? The same Songhai in the Niger Bend that had all the cavalry? You see what I'm saying? I mean, if you don't know people have horses, you'll never say, yeah, well, they were fighting with the horses, right? But anyway, this battle was a strong defeat for the Songhai, but there were internal elements that were much a part of the defeat of Songhai. There were battles and infighting going on in Songhai just months before the Battle of Tondibi. And once certain elements of the lines were broken, certain commands were broken, the army was discouraged very quickly, and it made the victory that much easier. But the Moroccan army of 2,000 then marched to Timbuktu. They never fired on Timbuktu once, not once. They came to the house of, I believe it was Muhammad al-Aqid, who was one of probably the leading scholar of that time. Ahmed Baba was his nephew. Okay. Okay, so they came, the Moroccan army under Judar Pasha, I believe, came to Ahmed Baba's uncle's house, and they said, we need a place to stay in Timbuktu. And he said, they said, we don't like what you just did to the Songhai army. You can't have any in our houses. You notice, just like in Kano, those are big houses. They're not small houses. They house a lot of stuff. The houses in Timbuktu are like that too. And so what the Moroccan army did was they built a small fortress within Timbuktu in 1592. There was a whole year that had gone by between the battle and the time they built their fortress. They built this fortress in 1592, and from that point on, they levied a small grain tax where the residents of Timbuktu were supposed to give them grain. Now, look, here's this invading army, right, that has just destroyed Songhai. And it comes there, and all they can get is a grain tax. The Muslims, ulama, Timbuktu's very complicated history, ruled by religious scholars for many generations, many centuries, about 3 or 4 centuries. At least it was ruled by religious scholars and groups of religious scholars. Okay, so the ulama, which is a generic name for that type of group, okay, the ulama of Timbuktu didn't like their being there. So they kept demonstrating, and also the Songhai under Askia Ishak began, guerrilla warfare tactics. Now remember, this is supposed to be the same time when they're destroying the libraries and burning the city, right? So the ulama didn't like that, so they are constantly, confronting the Moroccan invaders, peacefully and intellectually, right? Nobody's getting, no battles are going on in this whole sack of Timbuktu yet. It's already like 2 years later. So they're still having, you know, the guerrilla warfare. And finally, what has happened is that they've tried to change governors a couple of times. And the Muslims are still pissed off. You know, they say, look, get out of here. We don't want you here. Even though you did defeat the strongest army in the region, we still don't want you here. And they had this riot. They had this riot, and the riot, I believe, was in 1595, 4 years after the Battle of Tondibi. And as a result of this riot, 50 Moroccan soldiers were killed. 50 Moroccan soldiers were killed in a riot. So then the governor from Morocco changed governors again and said, we got to do something about this, right? So they sent another, they devised a very sneaky scheme. And they said, let's plan a rumor that says everybody in this particular is going to be taxed because of this riot, except for people in this particular house. And obviously, you know, the rich merchant says, oh, well, let me put my stuff in his house, right? So what house did they go to, except the house that had all the stuff? Now here's the invading army. And they had to come up with a scheme to get, you know, to get the gold and stuff from the merchants in Timbuktu. And that house was the house of Al-Aqib. When they got the Al-Aqib treasures and some of the, you know, other related treasures there, they also took about 70 members of the Al-Aqib family into captivity to teach the people in Timbuktu a lesson. Among them was Ahmed Baba. Now, Ahmed Baba, in his own writings, Chancellor Williams says that none of his writings are excellent. There are like 45 of his books that are out, that are still around. You know, when he was taken to Morocco, in chains, true, in chains, he was taken to Morocco. His personal library was also seized. He had about 1,500 books. But he wrote that most of the brothers there, the scholars, they had more books than he did. They weren't taken to Morocco. You see what I'm saying? I mean, the libraries continue to exist there. Ahmed Baba goes to Morocco. After a couple years, he finally sees the Sultan there. He confronts him. He said, why you put me in chains, man? He said, I broke my leg falling off your camel. And he said, well, we had to teach them a lesson. He said, well, why don't you, Ahmed Baba said, why don't you teach the Turks a lesson? They're the ones messing with your land. You know, and he really confronted the Sultan. Then the Sultan left him alone. He says, okay, you're not in house arrest anymore. You can go around and do what you want. Just don't leave Morocco. And Ahmed Baba became the most celebrated scholar in Morocco. He wrote books that are still extant today. And he came back after 12 years of exile. He came back to Timbuktu. And I think it was 15, 12, 14 or something like that. And that's what happened to Ahmed Baba. There's an excellent article, there's several, but one of the best articles that I'm aware of is written in the Journal of the Historical Society of Nigeria, 1964. It's by John Hunwick, who happened to be my professor of history at the University of Ghana. And I know, and he's interesting, he's British, but he's a brother in my mind. You know what I mean? And it's called Ahmed Baba and the Moroccan Invasion of Songhai. There are others too. But to get back to the Nigel Bennet, this was a sidetrack, and I'm sorry if I sidetracked too much here. Can we get the lights? You're really having me enjoy myself. I'm enjoying this. I don't get to describe in the detail that I'd like to, the materials that I spend these years collecting, right? Okay, so this is Barth's image of Timbuktu with the University of Sankore Mosque in the foreground. That's a northern view of Timbuktu. The desert is up here. The river is further to the south. Next, please. Okay, again, Timbuktu is part of an urban area. Here's Timbuktu, Kabara, and then when you get to the river, well, this doesn't have very much. It has other towns, Kurioma and Jatifa, and other towns that are part of the urban network that exists in the region. Just like all the rest of West Africa, the place with 200 million people today, tons of cities, tons of towns, tons of small cities, tons of small towns, and tons of villages. Next, please. This is a photograph. In fact, Henrik took this photograph. Sunset at Timbuktu. And you have, this is roughly the view from Bart's house, and you have the St. Croix Mosque in the background too. Reminds you a lot of, these are big houses, man. These are not small houses at all. Some of these houses have rooms in them that are the size of this room. These are some big houses, man. These are not small houses. Next, please. Gundam, which we saw earlier from the overview from the ground, is still a very busy commercial center. Segu, this is an illustration from the 1850s of Amadou's palace. It's another story. We mentioned the jihad of Al-Hajj Umar, no we didn't, of Uthman Dan Fodio in Nigeria, the Sokoto Caliphate. Shortly after that, another caliphate was established on the western Niger. Again, just, you know, the region we're talking about now in 1818, called the Messina Caliphate. This is his palace. Gao, here you see the boats. From a modern view, it's the same boat. You can see how that could have, you know, 65 people in it and a whole, you know, and tons of goods. Gao was the capital of the Songhai Empire in the 1500s. Arabic records point out that Gao had a population of 75,000 in the 1500s. Next, please. This is when we talked about Jenny, the parent city of Timbuktu. We have a whole piece on Jenny in our piece on Timbuktu. Jenny is a very important city. It's very important. Now this is the old mosque of Jenny, done in 1898, the photograph, but at the same time the old mosque was done, there was a new mosque that was being built, and I have a photograph of that. Both of them are Jenny. Notice just one thing. See these two people here? That gives you an idea of the size of this building. You see it? It's an interesting place. Next, please. That's the new mosque, built around 1910. It's a fascinating place, and I haven't been there, but I've studied it so much I feel like I've been there. And I know people they've written to me who do research in this because they like the stuff I've been putting up. So they've been sending me stuff on it that would help, you know, to understand. But this is one of the most, this one person, a guy in Tucson, is trying to get this building to be registered as one of the most important works of architecture in the world. It's really a fascinating mosque. Next, please. Mopti. I have been to Mopti on the Niger River. This is some of the monumental buildings that you see there. You see a similarity in architectural style. Next, please. San. This is the mosque in San. You see the similarity in the style. It's not just coincidental that you have similar architectural styles. It's part of a plan which involves the urban, again, reflects the urban planning characters and qualities of the structures in West Africa. Next, please. Modern versions of the same long boat. I think they're motorized now. Next, please. Finally, we can go through them quickly. This is Kong, 1887. These buildings here are the four mosques of Kong. Kong was a Sunufo center that became a center of Islam and expanded after the fall of Songhai and the Battle of Tondibi and the rest. Many Muslims pressed further south, and there's one real important slide that I want to show you. It's probably coming up soon. Kong was one of those places where you had the African urban concept was a very expansive one. What happens was that people would move, trading families from different parts of West Africa would move into a particular city or town. They would stay there and conduct the trades that their regions were doing from there. And generations would pass And their children would build houses, and their grandchildren, and there was a ward that was built in the city. Kano, for example, pre-colonial Kano had 127 wards. Okay? Kumasi in Ghana had 77 wards. And Kam also had a number of wards. Next, please. This is a good example of some variety in architecture. You notice you have huts here. You also have different style buildings. There are people sitting on the outside. It's like somebody made ledges on the outside of the building for people to sit on like this. Very interesting. This is a Bambara housing from Senegal, 1880s. Another interesting set. This is the first European, Banje, is being prevented from entering the Jula quarters of Bobo Amasi city, Bobo Julaso. And you see them all standing out. About a third of these brothers have guns. Next, please. Kumasi. Shanty housing had an interesting variety. The most common roofing material was thatch, but you can see there's a great variety in the styles of houses. Next, please. Kumasi itself was a wonderful city, is a wonderful city. It's a very mountainous place. And it's the center of was the center of the Ashanti Empire that's now called Asante, A-S-A-N-T-E. And it had very broad streets. Some of them were 60 and 80 yards wide. They're like the Beltway, you know, like a major highway. And they would be swept clean every morning. And all of these, as you see, the farms were near the cities, and all of these were kept very direct routes to different parts of the empire. Next, please. This was done in 1819. This also was done in 1824. No, this was 1819. This is Baldwin, 1819. And you see the style of architecture that the Ashanti developed, a forest belt city. Notice that it's very different than the Niger Bend architecture, and it's different than the house architecture, and it's different than the walled Benin architecture. It expresses a different cultural aesthetic, but at the same time, it is purely African and uniquely African. Next, please. This is just a modern shot. This is the only modern shot in the presentation other than a few modern maps, where you have a Ashanti ceremonial activity with one of the Ashantihinis. There are several different types of Ashantis. There's the Ashantihini, but there are at least 20 or 30 minor Ashantihinis. And these brothers, oh, you talk about gold. Man, I've seen these brothers with big pieces of gold on their chest that must have weighed 10 pounds, gold rings that were big like this microphone out, on every finger, gold crowns. Look at this brother's gold crown. Can you see it? Look. This is all gold. This is gold-plated rifle. You see, he's got the gold on his wrist, and he's not a big Ashanti. I've seen photographs with the Ashanti, minor Ashanti chiefs with gold shoes, solid gold shoes that never touch the ground. You know, we say, oh, them golden slippers, huh? Okay, next, please. Ashanti was an important gold-producing region. But it was certainly not a Muslim center either, which is good. Okay, I want you to see something, because this is an Ashanti town. I see I'm losing a lot of my audience. It's because of the lateness. 8 o'clock. We'll be finished in how many? About 10 left. How many slides are left? Rough. I mean, just a few, right?
We got 64.
64, okay, that's 16, yeah, okay. This is the most important slide in this presentation. This is a plan from a French work in 1886 of an Ashanti village to the North Ashanti town. It's Kintampo. When you go there, you know it's not a village. Okay, just like, you know, Gundam is not a village. Kintampo is considerably bigger than Gundam. Okay. Okay, Kintampo. Now you notice the way it's diagrammed, you have a Hausa ward from the Hausa city-states, northern Nigeria, Kano, is a house of city-state. You have the Dendel Awards, which are stranger, different people traveling. You have another house award. You have a Mandi and a Ligui, which are Mandingo wards to the north and the west. You have a Dagomba and Masi ward, and you have one Ashanti ward in an Ashanti town. See, it was a system whereby people could live together and work together and build cities and make all of this vast networks of commerce work. And it was politically balanced. An Ashanti city, I'm going to stop calling it a town, with a mosque in the middle. I mean, black people are very tolerant, and when it works, it works. You can tolerate it. Next, please. Okay, we'll go through this quickly, just to give you an idea of the tremendous number of urban centers that you have. You see this blank area? Okay, here, this is basically Yoruba territory here. This is sort of a map of Yoruba. And then you have also Kumasi and Ashanti and forest belts here. Now, there's a break in the forest belt. Just to give you an inkling of the number of urban centers there are, the next shot is a shot that has some of these in the gap filled in. West Africa, where we're from, is a city, is an area with hundreds of cities and towns. Okay, next please. This is a Dahomean plan of the Abomey in Dahomey. We hadn't covered that, so I just thought I'd put some of the other regions we haven't covered. Next. Here you have a Yoruba visitation of some missionaries in front of a Yoruba king in the 1850s. Note the unusual and interesting styles of architecture. Carved architecture here, and some of the posts and stuff too. Some of the columns are carved. Dahomean, this is a Dahomean show of wealth, basically. But look at this building over here. Even if the artist couldn't draw buildings, he's trying to say that's a big building that they had. Dahomey is another story, so it's much more heavily influenced by Europeans because the slave trade was such an important part of the coastal economy. Big story, another episode. We have some materials on it, but not as many as others. We probably might have 40 or 50 things on Dahomey, but that's really not enough to do a substantive presentation. Okay, but you're like this. So their subsistence would really get off on this one. The Dahomean had women who were serious as cancer soldiers. And they're called, in historical records, Amazon. Here's a depiction of an Amazon soldier with the head of one of its victims in his hand.
In her hand?
Her hand, I'm sorry. I'll tell you, when she points a gun at me, I say, yes, sir. I'm like, you notice, she is armed. Next, please. Here's another one from Dahomey, and the brother is armed. The point is, one of the things, it's another episode. The whole thing about the gun trade and slavery and the rest is another episode, but it's